Hello and welcome to all our viewers on CFO Insights. I am Shelley, a financial technology consultant at Hyperbots, and today we are speaking with Jon Naseath, who is an accomplished executive with expertise in AI, machine learning, and computer vision, driving impactful technology solutions in education, healthcare, and business. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jon. Today, we'll be discussing the importance of GL coding in the chart of accounts, common mistakes companies make, and how technology can help maintain coding integrity. So let's dive right in. Can you briefly explain what GL coding is and why it is so important in the chart of accounts?
So just briefly what GL coding is, and I'll tell you an example for the importance. GL, throughout the entire business, people are doing their work and they're spending money, they're earning revenue, they're buying things or investing in product development. Whatever you're doing throughout the entire business, or that translates into equity, and you're making money for investors or making customers happy, whatever is your role. Whatever it is you're doing, there's a representation of that in the GL. And we have to be able to make sure that what you're doing, what you're spending, what revenue you're making is accurately represented in what's going to turn out later to be the P&L or your balance sheet. What did we invest in on the balance sheet, and what did we spend, and how much revenue did we make on the P&L? So if we don't map things correctly to the GL, then the rolled up reporting numbers will be wrong. And there's all these very formal, GAAP accounting rules over how things exactly have to be mapped in. The story example I wanted to raise real quick is actually just a few hours ago. I got an email from a very good friend of mine. I used to work, I'll just say, at a large organization, global organization, and he's a leader in that organization and spends his whole day talking to big companies around the world about how to reduce the cost of IT and cloud spending, and how to help them do strategies. So he pinged me and he asked me this question: where can I find the right definition of revenue? And I just kind of chuckled when I saw that, because there's people's whole career is spent how to help companies figure out how to define revenue for their business. And he's like, what's the definition of net revenue? And I spent a year working with a company where there were actually like seven definitions of revenue just within this company, because there was they called it gross revenue and sales revenue and rev ops and net revenue and all these different things. But the reality is, if you ask an accounting person, there's only one definition of revenue, and it's revenue. And there's actual policies around how that's defined. The catch there, the reason I bring it up is, if you've mapped all these different things that you do in your business to the GL, and then you map that GL to management reporting, different management reporting people will want to see how what they're doing impacts revenue in this example. And so they can make up their own definitions, but they should define, there's one thing that is accounting GAAP, audited revenue. All the other stuff is management reporting ones. And if you've mapped stuff in wrong, then the core number's wrong. And if you map stuff in wrong, then the other piece is wrong. And just bluntly, if you do it intentionally and you're trying to hide things, people go to jail. So that's why it matters. That's a big part of why it matters. But also, so investors can understand what they're doing, and so management can have clear views of how they're managing the business. Long answer to a short question, but it was a pretty loaded question.
And in your opinion, what are some common coding schemes that companies should follow when setting up their chart of accounts? And can you provide examples from different industries?
In the most simple way, think about it as your P&L and your balance sheet. And as you walk down your P&L, revenue, cost of goods, operating expenses, whatever you have in your P&L, and as you walk down your balance sheet, assets, liabilities, etc., all it is 1,000, 2,000, or whatever is a number, a code that represents that walking down your P&L and balance sheet. The root of your question, though, is within different industries, there's become standards, quasi-standards around how they're doing their business. Now, the reality is every company within that industry is also going to try to find their competitive advantage, and so they'll do something that's unique to them. And so it's not that everyone's doing exactly the same, but when they do roll up their P&L and roll up their balance sheet, I remember I was in a job where it was my job was to take that from the accounting team, roll it up into these investor analyst reports, and then we'd hit submit to go live at quarter end. And there was an army of 60 investor analysts whose whole job, it seemed, was to find any errors we had in any of those numbers. And what they're doing is they're mapping that financial statements that we give them to other ones in the same industry and seeing, are we different, and wanting to compare them. So to some degree, you want to be similar to your peers in the industry, and then others you want to try to influence it. And we were an innovator. I'll just shout it out. This was Equinix. Equinix is an innovator in the space, and we impacted how the industry looks at metrics like FFO and other REIT-related and revenue, frankly. We made sure we were compliant with revenue, and there was lots of things besides just data center buildings that we had as revenue, and we had to make sure we accounted for them correctly.
And what are some common mistakes you have seen companies make with their GL coding structures? And can you provide examples for the same from various industries?
So if you think about the full GL, you can have like, what is your core chart of account numbers that like I was describing, but then you can also add other dimensions to that. So by region, by department, by channel, sales channel is an example. And so what you might see is the initial chart of account code and then dash something else, dash something else, dash something else that represent those different, think of it as like a star dimensions of your business. And you set it up so that you can slice and dice to get to that core number of what is the cost of this department in this region supporting that customer. So you have to try to set it up to tag those. Now, whether all those things get bloated into, or product type, whether all those things get bloated into the chart of accounts, or whether you look at it as the GL as part of the system you're using, the complexities or mistake that I've seen, someone thought it was a great idea to, let's put all of our product SKUs into the chart of accounts so we'll know exactly what product things we have. And as you add more products, or as you get rid of products, that becomes problematic because you just have all these codes in there, and it's very difficult to manage the roll-ups of old codes and new codes. And so there's complications of codes, there's lack of standardization. It's good to be aligned with what the industry wants you to see, because then the reporting can be compared. Insufficient detail, management wants to see a report for a certain insights. They can maybe reduce costs or invest in that area more. And if all you have is a generic, say 7,000 code for product costs, all product costs, then you're not able to break it up by which of those costs should be capitalized, which of those costs should be expensed. You need to be able to break things up based on how you want to manage the business. And then just overall inadequate training and documentation. You have a complex code, so you hire someone to code it to that, and then the person whose job is basically to process transactions, in this case maybe manually, they might be tagging stuff to the wrong place for a while. And maybe it's okay, maybe it seems like the right place, but it'd actually be more accurate if it was somewhere else. Now, when it all gets rolled up, maybe it doesn't matter at all. But when you want to see the right management reporting, you just need to be training your people to know how to code things and where, and be able to understand visibility of what's happening in the business.
And how do these mistakes that you just talked about typically impact a company's financial management and reporting?
From a finance perspective, I'll just be biased and say, well, it creates a lot of work for us and it's no fun. Like, you're just wasting time. It would be amazing if you could just roll things up, have it reconciled, and then you do plan versus actuals, forecast versus actuals, and things just make sense. Usually what happens is you do plan versus actuals, or you do month over month recurring, or year over year recurring. You're like, wait, what? We thought it was going to be this, and it's this. And usually the executive who helped build that budget can sense why something's off in there. And it's been weird. I've been able to hey, there's something wrong in this number. I don't know what it is, but that number should not be like that. And sure enough, you unpack it and someone coded something to the wrong place, and you move it somewhere else and everything lines up beautifully. But it results in an upset executive is one thing, and that's not fun for anybody. Inaccurate financial statements, inefficient financial statements, just all that rework. And I don't think people appreciate how many hours accountants and finance people take checking and rechecking all that work. Not to mention compliance. I mean, if you're straight up wrong and you're not managing that, it's bad. And I saw a couple of years ago, I was with a company where they were a small company. They had become a very big company. Suddenly the auditors were scrutinizing things more because they were thinking about going public. They were reporting to Wall Street. They were going to go public. And so suddenly the audit became a lot more stringent, got locked down on them, and there were compliance risks. And it has resulted in some very bad things for that organization because they just weren't ready for the reporting and financial requirements of contractual obligations for loans, and they weren't able to go public. Resource wastage, just a lot of rework, reclassifying things, especially after if you booked it and that's how it ended on month end, and then you got to go back and reclassify numbers from previous periods. Again, that's no fun for everyone. People question, do you know what you're doing with your job? Honestly, you do that often enough times and the CFO is going to lose their job. They want to avoid that. Let's stop on that happy note. Go to whatever next question is.
And how do you think technology can help maintain GL coding integrity and reduce these mistakes?
Well, it's really, really good at reconciling across all the different dimensions, looking at all the different sources and tying it together. Now, on the flip side, it's not great at, it hallucinates. AI can hallucinate. So you got to figure out that balance between understanding all possible numbers and giving an accurate output on the flip side. So there's different tools and ways that AI is working through that as an example, or automation tools are working to do that. I have some ideas and ways that that happens, but let me just give one quick example. We've been talking about the GL code and mapping things correctly or incorrectly. I was talking a few months ago with a friend of mine and also the controller of a huge global organization, and they have departments everywhere. They have one of the most complex ERP systems that you'll ever see. And they're working to transition from the old instance of that ERP to a new instance of the same ERP, but just a more modern version. And they're going to redo different things in their GL. They've gone through the business planning and they know what they want that future state GL and reporting metrics to all look like. And they finished that, but it's going to be another at least year and a half, maybe 2 or 3 years until they get this full ERP fully implemented, all trained, and are in the new future state system. In the meantime, they've got 1.5 years and 2 years or more, because things always go wrong in those projects. There's always some reporting that's missing, even if they say they go live, it's never right at first. However, even with what I just said, it's never right at first. I believe there's an opportunity here where if you define what you want your future state reporting to look like, and you have that data coming in and you've created this mapping thing that you're going to give off to some developers and they're going to rebuild the system based on that new mapping tables. And then you have to extract the data from the old table, load it in the new table once it's developed, and then wait, maybe the reports work or they don't. And it's huge UAT testing. Anyone who's been through that knows it's painful. I think AI can do a lot of that stuff. I think you can take from your legacy system, your current system, you can say, here's what I want my master tables to look like. Here's how I want my reporting outputs to look like. And it can help produce those. Now, again, it's going to hallucinate. You got to code it the right way to make sure that it gives you the right outputs. A lot of the pain, which is real pain, or a lot of the late nights because there's an error and there's rework you have to go through. A lot of the cost of hiring an army of people to fix an error that was in there historically and rebuilding your reporting. A lot of that, I believe, will be able to be fixed by AI. And it's no longer for me just a belief. I know it's real because I'm seeing it happening in different companies I'm talking to, working with, or making it happen. And it's fun. And frankly, I'll just give you guys a shout out. You're on your own track with the products that you guys develop, and I'm seeing good things. It's exciting to see what you're building and where this will lead to.
Thank you so much, Jon. And from your experience in the finance industry, can you provide an example of how automation might improve GL coding practices in a specific industry?
The manufacturing industry is complex a bit because it's not all just kind of in the cloud SaaS and I'll say relatively easy. So there's so many different stages of raw materials, work in progress, finished goods, making sure you're coding things all to the right place, and then making sure it's current. I think that speed aspect is really important because then if you don't get it right in time, you're making accruals and you have to fix them later. So I think that can reduce a lot of human error and complexities when things go away. And I think automation will fix a lot of that stuff.
And what best practices would you recommend for companies or for our viewers looking to implement or improve their GL coding system?
Don't get over bloated, is the way I like to describe it, in your GL. Keep it relatively simple. Think about what is the core dimension of your GL, and then what are the sub-dimensions, sub-ledgers that tie onto that. Make sure people have the training they need so that they're not screwing your stuff up. I remember a friend of mine was in accounts payable, and he had a paper on his screen he would just keep, and all he was doing was coding things to those key numbers. And that master table, when I come to a new company, I'll actually, based on that, I'll go around and ask the people in these types of roles, show me your kind of like cheat sheet. What's that master thing for mapping that you rely on? And they all have them. They all pull out, well, this is what I look at, this is what I rely on. And I like to take those cheat sheets, standardize them into policy and make it real. Use technology wherever possible. I do think AI is great, but I think that there's lots and lots, throughout my whole career, there's been automations of things. So there's lots of things that are proven as proven as technology automations. Use them. We don't need to reinvent AI just to do something that's already fully automated. And then use AI for the stuff that couldn't have been automated previously, that is now enabled. And the combination of those two things is where you get really powerful. And then just basic, I'll call them controls, reconciliations, making sure that things are coded correctly. doing budgeting and doing those plan versus actuals. Best call out here is make a partnership between FP&A, finance, and accounting. Accounting wants to get their numbers right. They're very proud of that. But then it's FP&A that is actually creating the management reporting a lot of times and a lot of the forecasting. So if those numbers are off, work together to make sure they're right before you go spread it all over the business and tell them that they're idiots because they screwed up some number when really it was an accounting finance disconnect. That never happens, but just hypothetically.
Thank you so much, John, for these valuable insights on GL coding practices and how technology can play a crucial role in maintaining financial integrity.